Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 4. So we've been off a couple of weeks. Sorry, we've been busy. We've been bringing in-person events back, among other things, but glad to be back in the saddle with three great guests. And thanks to everybody who has been watching on YouTube, been listening on your podcast provider of choice. As we get rolling with this new season, it's great to have podcasts back because it's just another step toward feeling like, anyway, that we have some sense of normalcy returned, even if maybe we don't. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. Glad to be here with a all-star group of panelists. Rana, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about behavioral signals and the great work that y'all do.
For sure. Thanks for having me here on the show, Bradley, first off, and good to see you again. I'm the CEO of Behavioral Signals. I'm Rana Gujral. At Behavioral Signals, we focus on a variety of insights that can be generated from the tonal portion of a conversation, pitch and tonal variance and tonality. We built some advanced engines that cue off on the tonality or the how something is being said and unravel a variety of signals like emotions, behaviors, and also certain advanced classifiers that can potentially be called intent signals. So, for example, predicting the intent of a participant in terms of the context of the conversation. Will the client buy or not buy, or debt holder pay or not pay, or you could just take it in any direction. So those engines have been in the works for over 2 decades, through a lot of research the founders have done. The company was a spin out from USC. A lot of this technology was built at USC at Sail Lab. One of our founders is actually an executive director and founder of Sail. And what we're doing today with this technology is we've built a product called AI-mediated conversations. And AI-mediated conversations, or AMC, is really an AI-powered matchmaking engine between agents and clients. So what we do is we build these advanced behavioral profiles, or we also call them conversational bioprints, based on processing previous, vocal interaction, previous phone calls, and focusing just on the tonality piece. And then using those profiles, we have a very good understanding of the conversational dynamic of an individual, and then use that knowledge to find the absolute best matches between an agent and client dynamically live in the moment. And that has a direct impact on the outcomes, coming out of those conversations, whether that be increased sales or improved revenue recovery or other CSAT KPIs. So that's a very, a high level overview. There's a lot that the technology gets into, but that's what we do.
Excellent. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Bradley.
You got it. Next, John, Open Voice Network. Great to have you on the show as well. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about the great work y'all are doing with Open Voice Network.
Bradley, thank you, and it's great to be part of this. Can you hear me? Just raise your hand, Bradley, if you can hear me. I was afraid the connection was great. John Stine, Executive Director, Open Voice Network, and we're the open source community, really, of the Linux Foundation, dedicated to voice and dedicated to voice that, quote unquote, is worthy of user trust. It's a look to the future of a worldwide voice web. And what we do is we're working on technical standards and also ethical use guidelines for this future world of billions of destinations in the voice web. My background, 15 years in the retail business, trying to persuade customers to buy products. And then another 15, 20 years in the technology industry, from Intel to Cisco and back to Intel. Conversations that started the Open Voice Network, and Bradley, you were part of it. Really took a look at what is the future going to be of this amazing industry, and what does the worldwide voice web look like, and what will it demand to be, let's say, open, interoperable, and value producing for the entire world and the entire industry. So Bradley, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
John, it's great to have you as well. Thank you for making the time. Thanks for all the work you do too. Third, we have Thomas Lindgren of Wanderword. Thomas, it's great to have you. Great to see you about a week or two ago as well. Tell us about all that you do and tell us about Wanderword.
Well, thank you, Bradley. And first of all, apologies for sitting in the back of a car, driving back from a mountain trip. But hopefully you can both hear me and see me, and even though it's pitch black here in Sweden. Once again, Project Voice X, excellent event. Super fantastic to be there in Fort Walton. Yes, so Wanderword is set out to be the tool for anyone who wants to create interactive audio entertainment. What we do is we focus on saying that we want to create tools. So if you want to create an interactive audiobook, interactive audio game, we have the tools for you. We see that we are now with voice and conversational AI, very much like we were in the beginning of the 2000s for the mobile phone and when the smartphone came out. And to actually replicate what we did in the gaming industry, we need to put tools in the hands of authors, content creators, and others, so they can actually develop the kind of entertainment we all want to see, and we all know that's going to be there. We have, amongst other things, an editor and an engine called Fabella, but we also have a studio developing first-class content. So we sign IPs from the best brands in the world, no matter if it's the book publishers, like the HarperCollins of the world, or if it's from the big gaming companies like Microsoft, who has, for example, In Exile, or if it's from Paizo, etc. One of the most known titles we have and we manage is called Starfinder, has been awarded many different prizes. And we also have one of the most played games on Alexa, which is called Cursed Painting. But myself, I've been in the gaming industry for a little bit more than 20 years. Prior to that, I was a consultant running a lot of business development around the world. Totally excited to be here and being part of this show. So thank you very much.
Thomas, great to have you as well. So just a great panel, and appreciate all of y'all gentlemen making the time. So with that, we'll get to the news. And this is a fun week because, I don't get to highlight the writings of Dan Miller all that often, but when we get an opportunity to do that, definitely enjoy it. Dan Miller of Opus Research wrote on November 1st, this is called M&A Watch, LivePerson's Transformational Acquisitions. And Dan, very good about being concise, but really talks about a couple of acquisitions that LivePerson made to transform their business, and sort of reflects on the larger trends at play. And as we go through the stories, we'll rotate the order. I'm going to just start with the same order we just used for the introduction. So Rana, I'm going to start with you. What do you glean from this story? What do you take away? You think this is, is there anything that stands out about what Dan had to say?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really interesting, but not necessarily shocking in any ways, right? So I think you've seen the trend emerge, and I think he in that piece of news he uses this word, which is just super simple, but it kind of sums everything, which is like, it's all about listening well. And it is all about listening well, and there's a lot of cues in those touch points, so in those interactions, and the question is, what is our ability to listen well, and how have we done that, say, a decade ago, versus what are we doing to listen well today? And those tools are changing, right? So I mean, those early days of NLP were sort of simply, trying to understand language and accents, and then derive words from, and the intelligence from meaning from the words being spoken. And now it's an omni-channel interaction. There's multiple touch points, and there's a variety of other intelligence that you can garner and gather from a variety of different touch points. And I think, what LivePerson's acquisition of VoiceSpace and Tenfold sort of it speaks to that you have to sort of like build that rounded set of capabilities. And I think it's very relevant, and you'd see that a lot of those consolidations. I mean, in fact, in one of the pieces of the article, we also sort of speaks to these large contact center solutions. I mean, talk about the big boys in the industry, NICE and Genesis and Verint. They kind of do everything in that stack, right? So from the telephony systems to the underpinnings and in the middle piece to some of these advanced speech analytics solutions. But for the most part, you have these specialized players emerging in the market that have these specialized capabilities. Some using AI, others not necessarily using AI, but they're still very relevant. And now the ecosystem is sort of like consolidating by using those special sauces into these stacks. And that's what we're sort of seeing. There's a lot of synergies. I mean, we're getting a lot of interest from some of these players as well. I mean, we're actually a partner of Unifor, and we're in talks with Verint and others. And we're talking to sort of like these players and sort of say, well, how do we fit in and how do we help you? So you built these advanced products and you built this capabilities that go solve a certain problem, like either it's automation or agent experience. But we have the secret sauce. We have this, not secret sauce, I guess, special sauce. And how do we actually allow the special sauce to improve the flavor of your offering? And so I think that's what this article speaks to. And it's really interesting. We're seeing this trend emerge, at quite an aggressive pace, I'd say, in the last 5 to 7 years. And I think it's going to accelerate. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, no, complete agreement. John, want to go to you next. Your thoughts?
I'm going to echo what Rana said and said so well. Two things. One, just the growth of the ecosystem. This is the sign of an increasingly maturing industry. Now, we're still in adolescence. Make no mistake that voice is, deeply mature. But the growth of ecosystem and specialty players is a very important issue and trend. The second thing is, let me emphasize the power of listening. I was in sales way back when, and had a mentor emphasize to me that the act of persuasion and communication was based more on listening than it was speaking. And in fact, he used this phrase, the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. That was a statement of priority. And we all too often ignore the power of listening and listening analysis within voice. It's focused on, we talk all the time about dialogue development, dialogue design, and conversational design, but listening. Conversation is speaking, but good conversation is driven by listening. And a couple of things taken away from there.
Yeah, no, complete agreement. And Thomas, want to go to you as well. Get your thoughts on what Dan wrote and what LivePerson has done with these acquisitions.
Yeah, no, and I'm going to echo both previous speakers here, and I really like listening well. It's extremely important, and we're going to get back to that as well on another topic later on in today's show. But also, what I think what John is saying, and we see that so many companies have now been around for quite some in this young industry, and very important that we all understand that we're in a fairly young industry. And now we start seeing that actually a lot of mergers and acquisitions start happening. We start seeing a consolidation in the industry. And I think that's the aspect that looking at that, saying, hey, some players are growing better and faster. And therefore, we will see some strong players in this industry. And I like that. But back to but listening well, it's a challenge, and we need to be better at listening in so many ways. So yeah, no, I echo both previous speaker on that note. Absolutely.
It feels like, well, I was thinking about the fact that when I started this show, I thought it was insane to call something This Week in Voice, because there's not going to be anywhere close to enough stories each week to justify a show. I'm just going to end up regurgitating the same stories every week. Talking about the same story over multiple weeks or whatever. And now we've gotten to the point where if I want to, I can just have the whole show be about mergers and acquisitions. And it's just going to get worse as we go along. So it's a good one to start with. Dan likes to talk about it. He gravitates to, and Opus research gravitates toward these enterprise use cases, which I think are really important. But my mind goes to just the M&A activity we're going to be seeing. And BotMock's a good example of that as well. We'll talk about them next week, just having gotten swallowed up by Walmart in a great deal for both parties. So anyway, great commentary all the way around, and we'll roll right on to story number 2, which is from PYMNTS.com. Healthcare's use of voice tech seen as game changer for diagnostics and patient experience. So John, I'm going to start with you with this. So here we are. I like to include some of these articles where, I guess I'd call it a catch-up article where, there's no news being made here. It's basically some news source kind of getting caught up or coming to some realization that maybe it had been out there for a little while. I'll call attention to the fact that this is a financial website talking about voice in healthcare, which I think is its own commentary. But I'm interested to hear, out of the generalities this article makes, what stood out to you and what you think this article reflects.
The first thing that stood out to me is, yes, it's a catch-up article. It's, oh my goodness, look at this. And to those, but it's important. Such a catch-up article is important because what we may see as obvious, voice can have value in healthcare, voice can have value in retail, voice can have value in financial services, voice has value in publishing. I mean, Bradley, all the industries that you explore so well, it seems so obvious to those of us who are in the industry. It is not obvious, and I think this is a takeaway for me always. It's not obvious to the corner office, because the transition of voice from being cool, oh wow, it talks to me, it listens to me, it responds to me, to being a tool, from COOL to TOOL, is the transition that we're in. And we're in the early days of that transition, and it's an S curve. And we're not going to see much, immediately right now, but it will take off. So such a catch-up article, hey, it's out there, is indicative of the place we are on the S curve and how much work we have to do. That's one takeaway. Second is, it only begins to explore what's possible in healthcare. I mean, Rana knows, Thomas knows, we're all aware of the remarkable research going on with biomarkers. From MIT to here to there to wherever, cough, and as in China, and you can have an early leading indicator diagnosis, not a complete diagnosis, but a leading indicator of COVID-19, of Parkinson's, of schizophrenia, of this. The research papers are abundant, as well as the fact that voice is hands-free, it's hygienic, and et cetera, and the use of voice in multiple clinical settings, from the surgical suite to just the daily operation within a family practitioner's work. No longer touching the greasy screens, no longer sitting there and ignoring the patient while the clinician is typing desperately to do the charts. So it's indicative of where we are. It's also a wake-up call for all of us, but it does begin to explore, my goodness, there's tremendous opportunity here for us to develop value and move voice from being cool to being a tool for value within healthcare.
No, that's great. And Thomas, I'll ask you the same thing. What stood out to you in this article, and just from your point of view, with the work that y'all do with gaming and interactive audio entertainment, noting the fact that a company like Constant Companion, who's gotten their technology into all sorts of senior living facilities and health systems, has established such an ecosystem in Beachhead to where they're looking for content. They're looking for entertainment to keep people entertained. So we're really seeing some interesting blurred lines. It'll be interesting to get your thoughts on this article and what stood out to you.
Yeah, first of all, I think it was an extremely well-written article. It was easy to understand for people that are not in the industry, and thanks, John, for pointing that out. With things that we know that are in industry, but this article points out in a very easy way for the patients and for the doctors that, hey, look at all the uses you can have with voice. And the second thing I think that was very interesting with this are showing that can make you wait. Again, exactly like John said, the doctor can talk to the patient, and while they're talking, someone is actually picking up what is said, and you can then get that transcribed right after that appointment. And the doctor or whoever it is does not need to sit there and write notes and then type it out and then send out a prescription, whatever it is. Shows the efficiency. Thirdly, I think exactly saying, look, now room or wherever you are, you can actually enjoy voice. You can interact and using this in a very good manner, where obviously like entertainment can play a big role. But from a healthcare perspective, you can call on someone and they can understand what you're asking for without having to be in the room. And you don't need to be monitored by a video or anything like that. You can do it all via voice. So I think that this article highlights a lot of good things and really truly showing how far we have come as an industry and how we can really use this technology and the various technologies behind it, and showing truly the benefit to consumers, what's in there. So no, I really liked it and enjoyed this article, and thank you for sharing this and having us to talk about it. And from a pure entertainment perspective, I'm making a lot of parallels and seeing what big hotel chains are doing now. They are putting smart speakers and voice assistants into the hotel rooms because they want, like John said, they want the hygienic way of interacting, so people don't have to touch that screen or a remote control, whatever, but you can have entertainment and other things completely touchless. So no, I think this article highlighted a lot of good things.
Excellent. Yeah, complete agreement. And Rana, I'll turn to you. You've been in the space for quite a while. You've got a lot of experience. We've all sort of been through, is voice in healthcare ever going to be a thing? Oh, wait, okay, now it is, which is kind of interesting. What stood out to you about this piece?
Yeah, look, I think there are two ways to look at this piece, and there's really sort of two different perspectives, in my opinion. Right. So the first is the evolution of the technological capabilities around sort of leveraging vocal biomarkers, and that's relatively new, right? So we haven't had a lot of things happening in this space until I'd say the last 5 to 7 years, or maybe if you want to push it to the last 10 years. But the level of accuracy has still been really more like, relevant to a lab setting, not necessarily real world. And that's changed, right? So it's always been, we've known that biomarkers are very, very powerful, and vocal biomarkers are very, very powerful. And it can tell a lot about many, many different things, including the state of mind, including your health and well-being. There's a lot of science and research that has been done into sort of like, can I tell your health based on the vocal cues and the vocal biomarkers from your tone of voice, and generally how you're speaking and interacting? And the answer is yes, right? So there's been very interesting study that was done by Professor Krauss at Yale, which I love because it sort of keys into what we do at Behavioral Signals. But he compared the accuracy of cues one can derive from just voice, or and also voice plus facial expressions. And he proved that voice was way more powerful because it comes from inside the body, from the stomach, and from the lungs, and it's hard to hide how you're actually feeling from your tone of voice, but you can hide how you're feeling on your facial expressions. You can control your facial expressions, and that's something you cannot, just like breathing, you cannot control your tonal deliverance. And so we've known that, and I think we sort of known that you could cue off on those essential biomarkers to predict a lot of different things, and maybe potential heart conditions, and certainly mood. I mean, we do that, right? So mood and the cognitive state of mind, and we've taken it a step further by sort of saying, we have this information about the cognitive state of mind using the tonal signals, emotions and behaviors. What else can we do with it, right? So we ended up building an intent predictor where you could predict if a client's going to buy or not buy. So we could like giving an example, in the first 20 seconds of a call, we can make a binary prediction if the client's going to buy or not buy. So it's not a potential probability, it's a yes or no. And that prediction is about 83 to 85% accurate. It is that powerful, right? So now you can sort of take that and say, it could go into different directions. So piece of it is that vocal biomarkers and evolution of the technology. The other piece is simply, if you take the vocal biomarker piece away, is evolution of machine learning, and how that entire space has progressed, right? So what we're seeing is that the ability to, or the cost of training AI models is declining rapidly, right? So I think, I just saw a video from Kathy Woods at the conference recently, and she spoke about how the cost of training an AI model is dropping 68% every year. Every year it drops 68%, every year, right? So processing 1 billion images about say 7-8 years ago was $10,000, and now it's about 2 cents. Amazing, right? So, and next year is going to be again a 68% drop. So now you can do a lot of different things, right? So what you're seeing in this use case is, okay, you have all these interactions with patients and or their coughs. So you have these cough recordings, and you obviously know the outcomes because these are past interactions. So you know what happened. I mean, the doctors diagnose these patients. So in this case, I mean, machine learning, sometimes causation is correlation, right? So you're sort of like saying, okay, can I measure for certain patterns in certain coughs and then and correlate with the actual outcomes that was diagnosed, and can I come up with a certain pattern or a trend, which then allows me to go predict if someone is suffering with a condition based on that pattern. And if you have cheap training model capabilities, you throw a couple of billion voice recordings into that model, and bam, I mean, interesting things come out, and sometimes it's relatively accurate. And so I think that's what we're seeing here, which is there's not a lot of biomarker capability, I think, in that use case. It's more of, I'm just going to process all of these audio files and then correlate with the outcome that I already know of and try to come up with a pattern. And sometimes you get surprised. And I think in this case, yeah, I mean, it looks like, if there's a certain cough, it is a certain condition. But, if you remember back in the day, the doctor used to sort of make you cough and listen to it. I mean, some had a better year. So I think there's definitely some science backing that. So very, very interesting. And I think the whole space around vocal biomarkers is going to be a very cool space to watch. And you're now looking at these use cases where Apple Watch is now listening to your voice and your interactions, and it's coming up with a health assessment. How accurate that is, don't know. Probably not very accurate. I would but if there is if there's a concerning signal that comes out and that leads you to go get a checkup, I think it proves its point. I mean, that's all you really needed to do. It doesn't have to be a doctor on your wrist, but if it's sort of giving you certain signals and giving it to you repeatedly, and then you get it checked by a doctor, I think that's pretty powerful, in my opinion. So super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, complete agreement. And I'm a big fan of Canary Speech. I've talked about them a bunch. This is their bailiwick. There's some other companies working with biomarkers, and it's a fascinating field, is what it is, and it'll be fun to watch I'm going to go on to story number 3, and I'm going to read this headline. This is from CNBC. A startup says its voice recognition technology beats Google and Amazon at reducing racial bias. So this article is a, I'll be nice and call it a glorified press release here. My intention with including this article is not to discuss Speechmatics. I'm sure they're a great group of folks. Instead, I want to just sort of take a moment and allow the 3 of y'all to just share when somebody talks about bias in AI. The 3 of y'all come at the voice and AI landscape from 3 very different points of view. I would love to hear your thoughts because I think this article has numerous problems. I'll go into those after we have this conversation. You know, if there's something that stood out to you about the article, feel free to reference it. But more importantly, just would love to hear and get a snapshot in time of when somebody talks about there's bias in AI or even brings it up, what's top of mind for you with your 3 organizations, and how do you think about it? And Thomas, I'm starting with you, and then we'll go to Rana and John.
Oh yeah, thank you, Bradley. First of all, I think that the article itself is very good, pointing out the fact that there is a problem. It's back to the first article, you know, listening well. Because if you're interacting with a machine, no matter if it's through a customer care center or if you're like we do, produce entertainment and you want people to be entertained, it's extremely important that when you speak and you say something that the machine, in this case, the AI, understand what you're saying. And I, if anyone, know that we are based in Sweden. We have studios a little bit here and there around the world. We know that accents and dialects can be extremely difficult to be interpreted. So I think that looking at it, we need to come to a way higher percentage of the machines, the voice assistants, actually understanding people. We need to improve that a lot. No matter if we look at the racial bias or if we're looking at simply accents and dialects from various parts of the world. One of the biggest frustrations we have from our users, the consumers, when they use our products is that there are too many errors. They're saying something, they're giving a command, and it's not always understood. And therefore, they think that the game or the interactive audio book is not as fun because they have to repeat and repeat to get the command across. But that brings us back to what you're saying about the AI part, Bradley. And obviously, any AI, no matter what kind of AI we're using, it's always down to the data set. If we have a wide enough data set, and if we are using a data set that is actually bringing in the various dialects, accents, it's going to be easier to train that AI. We're going to learn. But then obviously also depending on the voice assistant itself, we need to be able to take that technology they provide us and use the data coming from it and interpret it in the correct way, and then feedback so people understand. And once again, AI will help, but for AI to work, we need to have way better data sets than what we have today. And then I'm not sure if this is, the right moment to bring that up, but Google, their initiative, what they're doing right now, and actually paying a lot of people around the world, saying, hey, we can actually pay you for speaking, and we can listen to your voice, and we can start learning from your voice, your dialect, and your various accents. I think that's an excellent initiative. So I think that, yes, I agree with you, Bradley, that this article has a little bit more of a glorified press release and a number of things that should maybe not be there. But I like the fact that they're bringing up the problem and they're putting the light on a problem we have in the industry, and that needs to be fixed. And it's being fixed right now. So yeah, many thoughts on it, but that's kind of summarizing it all.
That's perfect. Yeah, Thomas, thank you for that. Rana, I'll go to you. If anything stood out to the art, from the article, feel free to call it out. But basically, from your point of view with behavioral signals, someone brings up bias in AI. What does that mean to you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the article is problematic in one big way, that it's making these claims without necessarily, proving showing a link or to any proof. Where's the data set? Where's the research? Where's sort of like, what's backing the claims that you're. So it is press release like. I mean, I think you're right. It kind of is like more clickbaity kind of a thing. The problem. I think that being said, of course, there's a lot of bias in AI, but it's not AI that is biased. It's the people that are biased, right? So the bias in AI creeps from two aspects. One is the programmer, the person who's coding those models and building those models, and second is the data. And I mean, if you look at who's coding these models, and a typical AI programmer is as a young white male who's paid really well. And, what is the perspective of that person for maybe a person of color living in a project? Very little. I mean, you can't relate. And so, you're going to have to sort of take that into consideration. The other piece is data, right? So if you look at a data, we all know, I mean, the AI is as good as the data that is used to build that AI. And if you don't have a lot of data, you're going to have a very poor AI or very poor model. And so some of the communities that are underrepresented just don't have enough data in the system. They don't have data. I mean, the data is not just the fact that data might itself be biased, because there are biases that have been put in, historical and cultural biases, but there's just not enough data. I mean, there's not enough data for certain voices and for tones, certain accents. I mean, I'd say, what data set can one achieve for the Tibetan language? I mean, can you find it somewhere? I mean, probably none. I mean, and so, so that's a problem. And, but there is so I think it's extremely hard to eliminate bias. And plus, I mean, if you're building an AI model like we do at Behavioral Signals, you have to understand that the entire aspect of training is sort of like, has to be curated from every piece of that chain, which is like, where you're sourcing that data, how you're annotating it, who's annotating it. You have enough diversity in the data itself from different age groups and, age and sex in different regions of the world. And that in itself is extremely hard to do, because you have to source that data in. And so you have to sort of, you're relying on a variety of third parties in that entire chain to make sure that there's not bias, and it's almost impossible to maintain that. And then when it comes to you and you're building those models, then it's in your hands, and you sort of understand how you're actually going to actually build those models and in a bias-free way. I think there's one silver lining in this somewhat gray cloud, is that if you're going to build a commercial AI model and your model is biased, you're going to fail as a business. A biased AI model doesn't really work well, and eventually your product will fail. And so you'll get beaten out of the system. If you build a BI model and the people use it and then said, hey, it's not really accurate. I mean, the decision it makes it's really biased. Okay, well, I don't like it. I don't like the product. And actually, it's not about liking. It just doesn't work. It's not really accurate. And so there's an underlying commercial incentive and these commercial organizations to make bias-free AI engines. I mean, and unless there is that commercial intent, people really don't do things, especially commercial entities. So I think there is that good thing that, it sort of weeds out the problematic models out of the system. So yeah, I think bias is a very, very deep topic. There's also this big philosophical debate happening right now in the industry. I actually did a podcast where I got very deep into it, recently, where we sort of talked about bias and diversity and bias. And the problem is that, the debate in the industry is that, are you going to stick true to the premise of machine learning, or are you going to control the dynamic, right? So for example, how do we humans learn, right? So we humans are not biased by birth. We're biased by the surroundings of the ecosystem. So as soon as we're coming to the world where the bias kicks in, the first aspect of bias is our parents and their beliefs and their values, and they're telling us what's right, what's wrong, and we're observing them. And then it's our friends and other loved ones. And then we're building those bias engines by learning from the surroundings and learning from the ecosystem. And it's about pattern recognition. The machine learning is a model of that human learning, which is, okay, I'm going to give you data. You're going to make a decision based on certain attributes. Then you're going to validate that decision based on whether it's accurate or not accurate, and then you're going to double down or reject those hypotheses. So if you think about it, a true independent thinking AI engine should eventually become biased because it should learn from the surrounding, unless you're putting in certain codes and saying, don't be biased, don't do this, don't do that. Well, then the question is, who's doing it, and is that person God in playing in that role of machine learning, and is that also a source for a bias, and how do you control that? So I think it's a complicated topic, and what we've seen is and I'll stop after this, is I think there was a piece of article which I can't recall which one, and they looked at the deepgrams and a few other AI engines that are out there, including Watson, and found that they're very biased because they're actually very good AI, and they've learned from the ecosystem, and they're independent thinkers, and independent thinkers will be biased. So I'll leave you with that to think about. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I think that describes a lot of the crux of the issue. And John, I'm going to turn to you, and if anything stood out about the article, feel free to call it out. But basically, with your role at Open Voice Network, someone brings up bias in AI, where does your mind go? What do you think about? What's top of mind?
First thing, Bradley, to your great question, and I'm just going to riff off of the great comments of Rana and Thomas. But the first thing from the Open Voice Network is, yes, it's an issue. Yes, it's an issue. But the question is less of that's an issue, because I think that is broadly understood. It is, the article suggests there's technology that now enables greater, awareness and understanding of certain, ethnic groups. It's a data set issue, first and foremost. Is the technology the fact that they simply have a better, deeper, wider, better trained data set? Perhaps, we have to learn. But I think there's another takeaway that from the Open Voice Network we face, and I think we broadly as the industry face, and that is the outside of our bubble. And we all operate inside of our technology bubble and our voice bubble. But outside of that bubble, AI is just kind of, wow, it's fairy dust and magic. Stuff happens with AI. Well, no, there are processes, and AI happens through this and this and this and this. That is simply not understood. And AI, because it's not understood, is feared, is broadly feared. And, I don't know about this. It's interesting. You talk about voice, then you talk about conversational AI. Those are two different things to people. And yet, broadly, voice is a subset of conversational AI, but we bring up AI outside of our bubble where it is not understood, the processors are not known, the parameters and the issues and dependencies are not known. It gets very scary. It's part of what we deal with when we think about how we address the issues, very real issues of just being heard, of being understood. And I'm echoing what Thomas said. If you are an individual of a certain ethnicity or of a certain gender or of a certain age, are you going to be heard? That's critical. So there's a lot here to work through. Is it an issue? Absolutely. Is there some secret sauce? Probably not. My BS meter began to quiver when I began reading it, It is something we got to address? Absolutely.
Y'all have been mentioning secret sauce and the whole show. I'm starting to get hungry. There's a separate side note. No, this is great. It's great to get y'all's perspective on it. I will note a couple of things on this article before we move on. I think this article and articles like it actually do a lot of disservice to the topic. And I'll just read the headline again. A startup says its voice recognition tech beats Google and Amazon at reducing racial bias. First of all, I don't think it serves anybody for this to be some sort of like gamesmanship of some sort of game of one-upsmanship. Like, let's see if we can get some reporter somewhere to write an article just because we did something that we can maybe claim is a little less racist than somebody else. But when you get into the article, what I really don't like about it is that so the headline talks about reducing racial bias, and then the article is only about Black folks. Well, what about Asians? What about Hispanics? It's like, if you maybe you improve language recognition for African Americans by some amount, but maybe this doesn't talk about Asians at all. Maybe it's terrible. It's 1,000% off for Asians. So net, you didn't reduce racial bias at all. But with the way the journalist wrote the article, which you could call that racist, since we're calling everything racist these days, it's just a distracting, poorly written press release type of article that really does no service to the topic at all. And it is a serious topic, and the three of y'all addressed it with the seriousness it has. Stuff like this, just throwing it out there and using racial bias or as a front door to get some press coverage, I don't like it one bit. And here I am, shining a light on the article, but I think it's important to talk about, not only do we need to make progress in the actual technology, but we need to make a lot of progress in how we discuss the progress of the technology also. And so anyway, I'll get going. I'll get off my soapbox here, and we'll move on to our final story. So the final story was something that the local Florida press wrote about, Project Voice X, which was an in-person event a week ago. I really don't want to dwell on this article either, unless something stood out to y'all about it. To close the show, I would love to simply hear from the three of y'all. Y'all are executives with busy lives and a lot of responsibility. Rana, I'm going to start with you, and then John and Thomas, our original order. In your estimation and line of sight on your respective universes, are in-person events back? What are your thoughts on business travel? Are you traveling a bunch? Are you reticent to travel a bunch? Are you looking at 2022 and seeing yourself on a plane a lot, or you're not? Share with us your thoughts on business travel and events.
Yeah, I think, so personally for me, I have been traveling. In fact, I already had about 3 or 4 international trips and a bunch of local trips this year. It's not fun. It's way more complicated than it used to be with all the COVID protocols and COVID tests that one has to take in and out, blah, blah, blah. But thankfully it's coming back. I think the in-person events are slowly coming back. I see there's a few that are now happening in the Bay Area that are in person, but also next year, most of those events that were canceled for the last 2 years are back. They're scheduled. Will they hold or not? Not sure. But I think it's about time. I think we've sort of like tapped the productivity juice as much as we can from these remote interactions, and I think we're all sort of like feeling exhausted from it. We kind of need to sort of connect in person. We got to talk to each other and ideate. What I've seen is that it's almost impossible to be organic in a Zoom call. It's very transactional. There's going to be agenda. There's going to be questions. You can't just talk. Most people can't. You can't just hang out and just chat. And that's where a lot of cool stuff comes out. So that has to be in person. So I think this event is really exciting. And I think also it's important to have voice-focused events. There's not a lot of those, so I think the ones we have, we got a prize and treasure, and amazing things comes out of it.
There's only ours. There's no other. I know that's what you meant to say.
Yeah.
Rana, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a couple that claim to be, but they're not really voice. I mean, they have voice tracks maybe, but this is a voice only focus. So I think it's a very unique event from that perspective.
Yeah, I'm just being facetious with that. John, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Business travel back, in person back. You're going to be on a plane a bunch or not so much. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to be in a plane and probably much more than I ever anticipated. I've been at 3 face-to-face events in the past month. I go to a 4th this afternoon, a 5th next week, and and I would say 2 months ago, I would have said, oh gosh, Zoom is going to be fine. Zoom is great, as Rana said, for the transactional, for the agenda-based, for making presentations. But Bradley, I was reminded Project Voice as a great example. The opportunity to listen and listen carefully and closely, to see someone, to meet someone, to hear someone, what they need, what they're thinking about, that doesn't happen in a Zoom call. It happens in a hallway. It happens over coffee. It happens just in a casual, moment in between. And so that is what I have again realized, to my great delight, is the tremendous value of being face-to-face. I've always been a believer face-to-face. I've always traveled a great deal, and I have benefited from that. And so is it fully back? No. Are people still concerned? Yes. Are spouses still saying, John, are you crazy? Yes. But the opportunity to listen, to meet, to listen, and to learn is 10x face-to-face. And for that reason, yeah, it's coming back, and come Q1 2022, hello, United Airlines, here I come.
Perfect. And Thomas, I'll conclude with you on this one. Business travel, conferences in person, your thoughts as we head into 2022.
I love what John ended up with. United Airlines, here we come. Yeah, no, and I think it's absolutely, I'm going to travel a lot more, and I see it's a necessity, because Zoom calls, whatever, Google Meets, excellent tool if you just want to talk about one topic, get something done, and you might call it transactional, but you might also call it goal-oriented, one thing at a time. But the thing that are at the in-person events, like Project Voice X, excellent event last week. We sit and talk around a drink or a dinner or at the conference, and you can have a kind of a dynamic conversation. There can be 5, 6 people participating, and we're sharing information, we're sharing knowledge in a very dynamic way, where it's not always like staying to the topic, because we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy learning from each other. And once again, back to that this industry is not very old. And I'm referring back to when I started in the gaming industry a little bit more than 20 years ago. It was the same feeling. It was a young industry. And look where this industry has come, what has become of it now. It's a $180 billion industry these days. It's fantastic. It's successful. And I see that, since we are so many different verticals in the voice industry, it's extremely together and talk about these challenges and the opportunities and etc. You can only do that in in-person events. And so absolutely, I might not say United, here I come, but whatever airline it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be a lot more travel, and it's going to be a lot more in-person events, and it's a necessity to actually thrive and build the business that you need to do. So for sure. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, and I feel the same way. And I will note that as in-person events have come back, to whatever extent they've come back, we'll just use that phrase, have come back. It's been top down. It's been very senior executive heavy, CEO heavy, C-suite level heavy, and it makes sense because those are people who have more on the line. And so there's more impetus, more reasons to get on a plane and overcome the objections, whatever they may be. Now, I will say this, I'm seeing a little bit of it moving into middle management now, and middle management starting to be willing to get back on a plane for the first time for business. And that's exciting because we need that too. So it's working its way back. And some people, it's uneven. Some people are all about it. Other people are still objectors, and that's probably going to remain that way for some time. But it's good to get y'all's thoughts here at the end of the show on events and where we are with those. So that wraps up This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 4. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and your expertise with not just me, but the audience as well.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thanks, Bradley.
Thank you, Bradley.
Yeah, thanks to all of y'all. So if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on your podcast provider of choice, we appreciate you sharing and giving us some of your time as well. Thank you for subscribing to the show or listening to it. And until next time.